There is no nursing home in Laos and in Thailand. So your children are your nursing homes.
The conversation we have today, it's therapeutic.
What sort of decision you want people to make on your behalf?
There's no one way, no one size fits all way, at least to do end-of-life planning.
End of Life Planning, Family Stories is a co-production of the Twin Cities Medical Society, providing physician leadership for the health of our communities, and TPT's Minnesota channel. Funding has been provided by these foundations and companies.
Hello, I'm Geraldine Steele.
And I'm David Gillette. Tonight we're going to discuss a difficult issue, making end-of-life decisions. It is not a fun topic, but it is an important one.
Absolutely. Increasingly, changes in medical technology, legal realities, and even family struggles suggest that it's a question we ought to talk more about or risk having someone else make our decisions for us. Tonight, we're introducing Honoring Choices Minnesota, an effort to encourage Minnesotans to have conversations with their families about end-of-life care. Honoring Choices is a partnership of TPT, the Twin Cities Medical Society, and the Citizens League.
Tonight we'll hear from families and members of the medical and faith communities about the options you have available to you and who you can turn to when you face these decisions. You can also look for a series of documentaries on these issues. Here's a preview from our first installment called Honoring Choices at the End of Life.
Most advanced care planning today is done at time of a crisis. When it's done, there hasn't been enough discussion beforehand, and so often family members state when they're faced in making a decision for their loved one, they said, "We never talked about this. I have no idea what they would want." And so it puts quite a bit of burden on family members to make a decision that they're unsure. We've seen family members that are put in that position, and when they don't have those discussions long term after someone has passed, it really affects how well that they deal with the loss of that person and the guilt that maybe they provided care that their loved one didn't want. So it has long-term effects.
And other times we might have a catastrophic event, a major stroke or a ruptured aneurysm, and there's no decision maker, or the family is polarized. So half the family feels that we need to do everything and we need to move to surgery and do everything to preserve life. The other family members feel that my mom or dad would not want any of this done and we should stop doing care. And both are right, depending upon the situation.
Up until now, because we don't know a person's wishes, when they come to the health system, we do everything. And then when people are stable and we can sit back and say, well, maybe now we should ask really truly, what do you want for your care? A lot of people get the care that they didn't want. They either get more care than they were thinking they wanted or less care. We are going to need to be more responsible as a consumer around understanding what options are out there for us.
This isn't a way to pull the plug. This is a way to honor the choice of the patient.
Paging Dr. Bender. Paging Dr. Bender.
None of us really want to talk about it. Most of us would like to live as long as possible if we've got good quality of life. But it's in the process of you're living with a chronic illness and your quality of life changes, you may not want as much treatment as you did before. And so it really requires an ongoing discussion. Up until now, it's been, I'm going to wait for the family to ask me about it, and the family says, I'm going to wait for my doctor to ask me about it, and then it never gets discussed until you're in the intensive care unit.
Death is a taboo subject in many communities. The thought is, if you talk about it, it might happen. So to help us understand why we need to discuss this stage of our lives, please welcome Sandy Schellinger, Program Development Manager for Advanced Care Planning at Allina Home and Community Services, Sue Shettle, CEO of the Twin Cities Medical Society, and Dr. Kent Wilson, President of the East Metro Medical Society Foundation. Thanks everyone for being here tonight.
Thank you.
You know, Dr. Kent, I think I was going to start with you because you're right here. I'm just wondering, why are these advanced planning, care planning directives, all these things we're talking about in this program now, why are they so important now today? Why has the discussion really reached a peak?
We really have a new situation. There's new technology to keep people alive. There are new immigrant groups who have come to Minnesota who are unfamiliar with the Western way of medical care. And it's also a circumstance in which we really want families to have discussions so that if families find themselves in difficult decision-making circumstances, decision makers will understand what a patient might have wanted if that person can't make decisions for him or herself.
You know, Sandy, maybe if I could ask you, I'm wondering, how are things different today than maybe they were in our parents' time or our grandparents' time? How have things changed more recently?
Sure, that's a great question. You think about our parents, and the medical technology 40, 50 years ago was different. A simple pneumonia 40 or 50 years ago was a critical thing, whereas today we have the technology to treat it. And so people are living longer with more medical complications, more choices, and less discussion. So over the last couple of decades, there's been less and less discussing about treatment preferences. So a lot of more of that element of surprise that Dr. Kent Wilson was talking about, where there hasn't been any discussion, so patients and families feel less prepared to act on their family members' behalf.
So how do we begin to bridge that discussion gap? How do you kickstart that conversation?
Any one of us could have a sudden illness or injury, and we need to ask ourselves, are our family members prepared enough and know our wishes well enough so that if their doctor came to them and asked them to make a medical decision, would they feel confident that it's what I would want, my family member said they would want versus what I would want, and that I'm not keeping my emotions in it and the moment of the crisis shaping the decision versus what my loved one would have told me.
Sue, let me ask you, maybe could you give us a little more background on the advanced directives and the living wills? Sure. Define those terms for us.
Sure. An advanced directive is actually the product of an advanced care planning process. So in other words, you sit down either with your family or you sit down with a healthcare provider and you actually fill out a document, and that's what the advanced directive is. And the living will is very similar to that. Sometimes they're viewed as legal documents, but essentially it's your wishes, and it's actually put down on a piece of paper of what you'd want to have your care plan, how you'd want your care plan carried out.
How does that process start? When's the best time to start putting pen to paper and making those decisions?
I think it's really any time. You know, I mean, we've been asked a number of times, you know, at what age do you have this discussion? But it really can be at the age of 18 and older. So it's really a time when I think that the patient is ready to talk about it, when the family's ready to talk about it, but really this is an adult conversation that you need to have with anyone over the age of 18.
So it sounds like you can't be too young for conversations like this.
No, you know, children, obviously that's something that's a little bit beyond what we're trying to work on here, but it's definitely an adult conversation, I think.
You know, Dr. Kent, could you tell us a little bit more about advanced care planning and just the process that goes along with that?
Well, it starts with getting your family or group of loved ones together and mutually recognizing that this is something that everybody needs to share, and that you need to start talking about what decisions should be made in a planned circumstance. As for instance, an elderly person or a person with a serious disease might have predictable kinds of things that could happen, and what decisions could be made there. On the other hand, for a very young person who is in good health, you know, if you're a 20 or 21-year-old person and you're in an automobile accident, very surprisingly, abruptly, and tragically, there should be some family discussion about who the decision maker would be in that circumstance and what bases would be used for decision making. What are the values? What religious beliefs might impact that? There would be a variety of things.
You know, we're almost out of time, but I did want to ask you, when you talked about bringing family and loved ones together, how do you pick that roster, if you know what I'm saying? How do you decide who needs to be a part of that conversation?
Most important person would be one or two people who you have confidence could make a decision if a stressful circumstance developed. Mm-hmm. But then you'd like to share that, and that might be brothers or sisters, parents. It may be a variety of folks, and if you don't have much in the way of family, then good friends. But it would be those people around you who are either family or loved ones who you feel closest to.
Thanks for the insights, everyone. I appreciate it. TPT and the Citizens League reached out to communities across the metro and beyond to form dozens of listening sessions. These sessions brought people together to share their own stories and feelings about end of life and reflect on how well they and their families are prepared. Many topics were raised, from lost loved ones to healthcare directives, and with every topic, we heard many compelling stories.
She would find a spot next to a tree and she'd sit down and she'd read a book, and really a part of her long, standing tradition. So, I chose a spot near a tree that was just, like a place that she would sit. And then I had her headstone as a memorial bench. And, there was tons and tons of, things along the way where people kept saying, oh, but you could save money if you did this, you could. And I was just like, it's not about saving money, it's about knowing her. And for some odd reason, that end of the process was about showing her that I was always paying attention.
I'm a decision maker for another friend of mine who's terminally ill. She has stage 4 melanoma. I said, what's the bottom line? And she said, if I can't drink champagne and eat chocolate pudding, I don't want to be here. And I said, that's fine. I'm not sure that's going to get me quite all the way that we need to be.
There's no support for the non-clinical help that you need, kind of like just managing the whole day and coordinating this person's whole life. I mean, their care and their bills and their friends and their family and visitors.
If you can get things arranged so that you're not stressed out about these other decisions and having to deal with all sorts of logistical things. If you can remove those things and extract them, then you can just focus on being with the person you love who you're losing. And you can focus on your sadness about losing that person and your joy that the person is still there and that you still get to be with that person.
You can find those clips and many more on our website, honoringchoices.org. Joining us are the 4 people you just saw to talk about their experiences. Emily Parker participated in a June session. Hillary Shea joined us on May Day. Jessica Parker Garvin was in our June session along with her sister Emily, and Trout Lowen, our earliest adopter. They all participated in an August 2010 listening session. Welcome to you all. Welcome. Well, we're going to start with you, Hillary, because it's interesting to me that it takes a lot to motivate people to do something like this. What motivated you to take part in this Honoring Choices listening session?
I was most motivated by the idea that that I would gain some healing and being able to finally complete the circle and give back something from the entire experience. I was finding myself on that finishing end of grief and realization, and felt that my mother always wanted me to share what I knew, and so it was a way to do that.
I wonder, Trout, if I can go over to, if I can go over to you, Trout. Yeah. What was the experience like for you?
Well, my first experience was about 4 years ago, and my sister was in the hospital in New York. Mm-hmm. And I flew out there. She had had cancer for 4 years, and I walked in and they handed me a piece of paper and said, do you know that you're your sister's end-of-life decision maker? And that was my introduction. 4 days later, I was standing toe-to-toe with a physician and explaining how we were no longer going to treat my sister, and it was pretty intense.
Mm-hmm. Was it kind of the same for you as well, Emily? Did you find that you can relate to what Trout is saying as well?
Yeah, it was definitely kind of all thrown at us at once, and it happened really fast.
It happened so fast, and that's why it's so important that we're doing this today. A lot of people don't realize how important it is, but sometimes you have a nanosecond to make that decision. Isn't that true? Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about what has changed since you participated in this listening session, because I don't know about you. Since I've been involved in this, everything in my life has changed. People are coming up to me and asking me about it. What has changed for you?
Well, still having young families, I haven't gotten around to doing my own healthcare directive yet.
Would you like me to get the paperwork now?
Why don't we do that?
Isn't it amazing? So you're ready to do it now?
Right, I'm ready. Which is it's on the list. Whereas before that it wasn't even on the list. Mm-hmm. even before our mother got sick, it wasn't on the list. It was in the back of the mind was I should do something so my kids and everything is in order, but I hadn't gotten down to it or even put it near a list.
Right, exactly. Don't you feel the same way, Hillary? I do. I mean, the same thing with you guys. You have to really start paying attention and say, I need to make some choices now in my own life. So have you done it?
No. But I did, however, make my friend do hers in time for us to have that conversation, since I was her medical decision maker and she recently died. So at least I had some inkling of what she wanted.
Mm-hmm. Because you know the questions are now going to start coming for each of you as people watch these videos and see that you participate in this listening. They're going to start asking, okay, you did it, help me do it. So I really encourage you to do that as well. Would you recommend this to others, Hillary?
I certainly would. My husband and I have both filled out our 5 wishes form and our healthcare directive, and losing my mom in 2008 made me sort of get my house in order, as they say, and everybody knows what we would like for our children and what we would like for our end-of-life care, because it was a very tough situation in my family.
Mm-hmm. And you already said that you're already getting comments and people are starting to come to you already. And
yeah, I seem to be the go-to person, and I'm also kind of a chronic nag, so I just need someone to nag me.
Exactly. And I feel the same way, ladies. I got my house in order a while ago, and I'm so glad I did. So now I can encourage others. What about you? Would you recommend this to others?
Definitely. I know that my husband and I need to sit down and have the conversation, and from the conversation we had in the Honoring Choices panel, I've learned that so many things you can learn about your partner and your family just by putting it down on paper and sharing it with somebody else. So.
Yeah, and you will be surprised. Has anyone been surprised at what they've learned so far about this process?
You know, I have to say, one of the things I think that is most important is it's a lot easier to make these decisions and have these conversations before someone's sick.
That's right.
It's a lot harder when you're talking to someone about their mortality and it's facing them. That makes the conversation a lot more loaded.
Mm-hmm. So Hillary and I have our houses in order. Before we leave, do I need to bust out the wine and the champagne and make sure that you fill them out tonight? Do we need to do that? Because it is that important, ladies. That's what we're here for, is to let people know you don't think about it, but now it's time to think about it. And it's okay to have the conversation, right?
And champagne is good. It's
champagne,
a good accompaniment.
It's a good day. Yeah. It's a really good day. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And hopefully, seriously, let's do it. We can sit down tonight and print it off if you want, okay? It's time. Well, thanks to all of our guests that are here tonight. You can go to our website, honoringchoices.org, to explore how Minnesotans from a variety of faith and cultural backgrounds approach these challenging issues. Up next, we'll meet some members of the medical community who help families talk about end-of-life decisions. But first, here's a sample of other stories you'll find on honoringchoices.org.
Both my husband and I come from very large families, and we're the only health professionals in all the extended family. So every health question comes to us, which is fine, but it really certainly reminds me of the great divide in understanding.
Why isn't it part of a regular routine, like when you go to your doctor, that every so many years you pull out your healthcare directive as part of your conversation with your doctor about this, and that becomes the trigger point? Because I think in life, if we don't have these trigger points, it's hard to kind of get motivated to do something.
It was because of the nurse saying these seizures can mean little brain activity. My mom was able to request a neurological exam, which prevented us from going the entire 3 days. I think we went 2, and they had the exam, and once we found out there was little or no brain activity, we could make a decision.
As caregivers, we feel we're put on this earth to make their lives better, to support them. And one of the most troubling aspects of that is as they start fading away, when is it okay as we as caregivers can say, it's all right, we've done enough, you've done enough. We can bring in hospice care, we can bring in other care, and let them just go in peace.
There have been a lot of medical changes in the past 100 years. You see, it used to be that if you were approaching the end of your life, there wasn't much a doctor could do. But today, doctors can keep people alive seemingly forever. We're here to talk about how recent advances have complicated families' end-of-life choices. Is Vic Sandler, Medical Director at Fairview Home Care and Hospice, Eric Anderson, Medical Director, Allina Hospice and Palliative Care, Kathleen Culham-Pera, Associate Medical Director at Westside Community Health Services, and Jody Crostek, Pain and Palliative Care Coordinator at Children's Hospital and Clinics of Minnesota. Welcome to you all. Welcome. Well, we're going to start with you, Vic. So many questions, so little time. What do you tell people who are afraid to talk about this? Because it seems to be a real challenge for even those of us who know a little bit about it.
Well, the interesting thing is that people really aren't afraid to talk about it. I think, in fact, in my experience, what's unfortunate is doctors are more afraid than patients. And that's what we're trying to change. But one of the things we're trying to do is trying to involve the community and trying to involve the whole healthcare team in participating in these discussions, because oftentimes what we find is that patients are ready to have the discussions, but the doctors aren't. And the patients are waiting for the doctors to initiate these discussions, and the doctors don't. So that's why we're trying to pull in nurses, social workers, chaplains, more members of the healthcare team to facilitate these discussions so patients can have their wishes honored by having these discussions in a timely way and not wait for the doctors to get ready, actually.
But Kathleen, what is a timely way? How do we define that?
Well, that's a good question, and I was wondering that too as Vic was talking, but for me, I think it depends upon where people are at. If they're young and healthy, that's a good time to think about it in terms of what do I want to do if something disaster to happen to me. But if they're elderly and I'm going to talk to them about a new diagnosis that's life-threatening, life-challenging, then that's a time to really specifically say, how do I want to think about spending my last days? So in many ways, it can be every single patient who comes in every single day.
Well, we all feel so immortal. Often we feel so immortal and we feel like I don't need to have that discussion yet. How do you encourage someone to take the time to have that discussion, no matter if they're in their 20s or 50s?
Yeah, and I deal, of course, with young people as well as older people. And I think to ask people what they value in life. And most of us want control over our lives and say we make choices over other things. We should make choices about our health care as well.
It is about control. I have a sister who's bald-headed by preference. It's not a problem. And I said to her, you better have a health directive or your mother's going to put a wig and some red lipstick on you, whether you like it or not. It really is that simple. It's about spelling out what you want. Right, exactly. You would think that most of us would want to do that, that it would be important for us to do it. What's stopping us?
Well, I think Dr. Sandler mentioned that patients are kind of waiting for somebody to bring it up. And that's probably one of the biggest barriers. I've found that once someone in a family has had a discussion and gone through the process of doing an advanced directive or living will, they find that, gee, it wasn't so bad, and are willing to encourage other family members to do it.
You know, I had a question, if I could jump in now, Geraldine, to Vic. When we did these listening sessions, several people mentioned, you know, I was brought back from a coma or a heart attack, and they were concerned that if I had a healthcare directive, I might not be around anymore. You know, the same decisions might not have been made. What do you say to people who have those concerns that they may not survive an instance like that?
Well, you know, the very good thing about a healthcare directive is that you can decide anything. You can decide that you want very full aggressive care, and you can list that in your health directive, or you can limit your treatment. The reality is that healthcare directives primarily, though we want them to be done by people in younger age groups, they're really important for the elderly, and that's what I've done in my practice as a geriatrician for a good part of my practice. And what we want them to do is decide things about their values, put them into a health directive, and the reality is what we find is that overwhelmingly they decide to limit their treatment, because what elderly people want to preserve their dignity and their quality of life. A lot of times that's associated actually with less aggressive medical care for many elderly people. So that we really want to allow them to make that decision and to decide to have less aggressive care. If that is their value. If on the other hand they want aggressive care, they can list that. That's not usually the case, though.
You know, Kathleen, communication is obviously very important in taking that process, but if you're looking at an immigrant or a refugee community where maybe there's just simply language barriers, How do you address a challenge like that?
So I work at Westside Community Health Services, and the vast majority of our patients, English is a second language, and there's limited literacy. And there are, we strive to work with an individual, understanding them in the context of their family and in the context of their culture. Because cultural orientations and family values really influence individuals as they come together with their families and make those decisions. So communicating, first of all, we work with interpreters a lot of times. We work with extended families who have a range of language skills. There are really written materials and videotapes and people for different languages to have that. But communicating with people in their own language is really part of number one.
Jody, I have to ask you, what are the medical realities of this 21st century that makes the end-of-life planning so much more important than it was, say, even 50 years ago?
Of course, there's so many more interventions that we can do now and really prolong life, but maybe not prolong quality or improve quality. And so it's good for people to realize what quality of life means to them and to spell it out for their providers.
Eric, I was recently asked by someone, can I change my mind once I do my health directive?
It's really important to keep in mind that a health directive only comes into operation when you are unable to speak for yourself, because that's when you do rely on your trusted person to help make decisions for you. And so no matter what your health directive says, at any time you can decide something different.
You can decide any time as long as you can speak for yourself.
Right.
That seems to be a difficult message to get across. Why is that so challenging? It seems like that would be the easier part of it, but it isn't.
Well, people, the purpose of the advance directive is to go into effect when you can no longer make a decision for yourself, as Eric mentioned. But and that's critical because so many older people do lose mental capacity, either from acute illness. If an older person goes in the hospital with pneumonia, they may become very confused. Many older people, as we know, develop Alzheimer's disease and dementia and lose mental capacity. So it's so important for older people, if they want to have their wishes and values followed when they lose mental capacity, either from an acute problem or a chronic problem, that they fill out an advance directive and pick someone to speak for them, a healthcare agent, as we call it in the advance directive jargon, to make their decisions for them. It's critical.
What about going back to the idea that you said doctors sometimes have trouble bringing up the subject with their patients, but a lot of people, I know even members of my family, they have multiple doctors in their lives. So is there ever an assumption that, oh, the other doctor is going to talk about it? How do you know which doctor to start this process? Maybe Jody, I'll send this your way.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think that's a good question because most people do. But the emphasis now is really to have a primary physician, to have a coordinating physician. And often it's a primary physician or the primary nurse practitioner who will bring that up. And sometimes it's a patient themselves. You can certainly bring it up to any of your physicians to talk about it.
And everyone, you feel, the medical community, no matter which facet or approach you take, everyone's equipped to have that conversation?
I think some are less able to, are more reluctant in the medical community.
So my cosmetic surgeon, not necessarily. Okay, got it. Check.
You don't need cosmetic surgery.
Well, see, now I have to ask each of you, I would assume, have your health directives, correct?
Yes.
Are you surprised that even among us, those that have been part of the listening session, have said tonight that they still don't have it? Have you been surprised by that?
Not at all. My wife and I just did ours a few weeks ago, and after talking for all this time
because you knew you were going to be on the show, is that the...
And it was a wonderful experience, illuminating. I learned things about her and her thoughts on things that wouldn't have come out otherwise, so highly recommend it.
I'm just amazed that people don't. You know, we plan for everything else in our lives. We have fire insurance, we have car insurance, not because we want to have a car accident or have a fire, but because just to prevent it or to plan for it. And I'm just amazed that people don't plan for something. We're all going to die at some point and need medical care.
But can I say that for some cultural groups, to really talk about death is a way of inviting death, so people can be hesitant to say the word, to sit down and talk about that. To plan it invites it to happen, and it becomes really a taboo. So in many of the cultures that I work with, that is the case. And so this is a new idea that you could think about what you want. And the concerns that people might have that doctors might withhold care from them rather than give everything is an added, challenge for people. on
Well,
top of
maybe I could ask about the language and the taboo, because I know even when we were preparing for this program and writing scripts, we'd hit the death word, the D word in the script,
yeah.
and we'd all kind of look around at each other and say, should we switch that to end of life or not living? You know, there's a definite discomfort level there. So what's the
Yes.
language?
Well, the first time I told someone they were going to die, it was a Hmong man. He had liver cancer, and I didn't have an interpreter. It was the 1980s. We didn't have interpreters in the hospital, and I told him as well as I could in the most gentle voice that I couldn't cure him, but I'd be able to be there with him and help him over his time. His wife was doing the interpreting for me. She talked to him in Hmong, turned around to me and said, thank you. And I said, he said, thank you? She said, yes, because you told him he's not dying. Huge, great example to say that I learned. I'm not going to tell an older Hmong person they are dying and use the word death and dying. There are euphemisms. The day is getting darker and not brighter. You're going to be 120 years old, which is kind of a euphemism. And those is important for us as healthcare professionals to use euphemisms that people are comfortable with.
Thank you, everyone.
true.
We
Thank you
appreciate
so
the
much.
insights. You know, end-of-life conversations can be difficult, but when we do talk about dying, many of us turn not to our medical professionals, but to our faith community.
In the Islamic context, a lot of reference or mention of being ready and being prepared for death is kind of part of the discourse in sermons, in a lot of times when religious scholars or imams give a talk, there's mention of it, and kind of it's an inevitable end, and it's a truth that we like to postpone and trying to avoid. So the context of talking about it is not strange.
I'm 59 years old, I've been a Catholic all my life, and I've always been taught, you know, if you commit suicide, that's a mortal sin, you're going to the bad place. Or if you kill someone else, that's a mortal sin, you're going to the bad place. So if me telling a doctor, don't do anything to save my mother, did I just commit a mortal sin? You know, that's what our religious folks need to help us with.
I talk about as a Christian that I believe in an eternal life. And when it comes to these moments and having these discussions, I can really, come to grips with how much I believe in that and how much I hope in that, and maybe even what I need to do to pay attention to how I need to grow in that for myself and in my conversations with my loved ones around that.
Now, you heard us talk about euphemisms a moment ago. Well, many people use those like passing on, and some say that that means passing on to the next life. We're here to talk about how faith fits into our end-of-life planning. It's Holly Wiest, staff chaplain at Fairview Ridges Hospital, Timothy Nelson, chaplain at Health East, and Tanya Rinkowich, hospice chaplain, Allina. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Well, Tanya, we're going to start with you. What exactly do you tell people who are afraid, really afraid, to talk about these end-of-life issues? And there are many.
Yes. The first thing I would say is, of course you're afraid. Every human being has some fear in talking about these issues. It's okay. I would just validate that fear and then encourage them to talk with one another with a sense of trust and just moving forward despite that fear that they have. They're not alone in their fear, not alone. Even healthcare professionals can get afraid when you're talking about your own life.
Exactly. But when you start out having this conversation, it's like you need an icebreaker. Is it possible to have an icebreaker, Holly? When talking about death and dying?
Really? An icebreaker. Certainly, I think an icebreaker when talking about advanced care planning is simply to make the point that the purpose of that discussion is to ensure that people have a voice at a time when they may not have a voice, and that to do some thinking about and talking with loved ones about what they might want for their care if they couldn't speak for themselves is not in any way going to hasten their death or make anything bad happen. It's simply ensuring that they are able, if they're in a position where they can't speak for themselves, to have the sort of care that fits with their values and their wishes.
Now, Timothy, you just heard her say it's about having a family member start this, right? Go tell somebody. Tell somebody, a family member or a friend. Here's what happened to me. I told a family member what I wanted. and immediately said, I don't want to talk about it. Hey, 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 stop right now. Don't want to talk about that. How do we make our family comfortable with having that conversation and to hear me when I say what I want?
That's a really hard one because people try to protect one another.
Yes.
I've heard family members say, don't tell my mother, for instance, that don't use the word hospice around her. I've heard hospice patients say, don't talk about that I'm dying with my family. The reality was that they're all fully aware of it. I think it's a matter of being able to gently invite those kinds of questions, those kinds of comments, and those kinds of conversations, but in a way that that's also in their time, and honoring the fact that people may need time to catch up with that a little bit, and to be able to find a way to enter those very intimate conversations.
Of course, for me, it's all about what I want and making sure they understand what I want. But when a family member disagrees, like I said to my mother, I wanted to be cremated. You know what she said to me? She said, oh no, honey, you're trying to get to hell quicker? Which, of course, we all laughed about, and it softened it enough for us to have that conversation. But sometimes they want something totally different from what you want. How do you stop that from happening?
I think that I don't know that you can stop it from happening. Families wanting different things from what you want. You may end up having to come to a respectful disagreement sometimes that, you know, you say to your mom, Mom, you know me, and you know that I make wise choices and I make choices based upon my values and who I am. You raised me.
Right.
I am the woman you made me, and I understand it's hard for you right now, but trust me on this. It'll be okay. So sometimes it's not necessarily about agreeing, but just respecting one another's choices.
Oh, can you come to my house? That would be fantastic. Holly, let's go over to you. Is there one question on the healthcare directive that is the most important question?
Yes, I think there is. And that question is, were you not able to speak for yourself, who would you want to have speak for you? And what that means is that you've given some thought to who you would trust to sort of uphold and promote your wishes. You have talked to that person about what you would want. You're confident that that person is on board with you and would be willing to stand up for that in maybe some confusing, difficult circumstances. That's the basic thing that you want to have established.
You agree, Timothy?
I do.
Yeah. So how do you get them to have that discussion as a chaplain? How do you say to them, there's that one question you want to pay attention to. Make sure you pay attention to exactly what she said. How do you do that?
I think much is what you said, which is to honor those choices and to be able to invite that to happen. It's a gentle approach. You know,
in your family. I don't know about my family.
Well, yeah, but we try to, as a chaplain, to be able to meet people where they are, but to invite that, to ask them about what their wishes are for the end of life, and be able to engage them in conversation with each other is really important. And it's not an easy task at all, but it's one that's always in the back of our mind as we're with people.
Tanya, has that been difficult when it comes to other nationalities and as the families receive that very important question? Have you found as a chaplain that you have to ease into it differently?
I think so, and I think it always helps to get a broader picture of the story of where a family comes from. And whatever nationality someone might be, really what we're talking about when we're getting at the healthcare directive and who do you want to speak for you is who knows me best, who knows my story, who knows what I hope for, who knows where I've been. And that's going to be important for each and every family and person that walks through that door. Who do I want by my side? Speaking for me. So yeah, it definitely, the culture will play into that. I don't know that it's harder or less hard for anybody.
Yeah.
Though.
So has anyone asked each of you to be that person?
Yes. I was that person for my mother.
And as a chaplain, when you go into a room, you don't know someone, but you're getting to know them as they're going through the process. Has it happened where they said, I want you to be that person that speaks for me now?
Not so far. People have had spouses or children, people who've known them for a long time, that they decide they want to have be that person, which I think is really very appropriate.
And do you have siblings as well?
I do.
So how was it when they found out Mom came to you?
It was fine. It was fine. It was interesting. My mother, 2 years before she had the stroke that ended her life, had had another medical scare, and she and I had had occasion to talk at that time about her symptoms and if she would want to have them worked up, and if there were something serious, if she would want to have surgery, chemotherapy. And she said no, she would not. And we made her advance directive based on that desire that if something serious happened, she would want to have comfort care. And that was very helpful in our family because then everybody knew what she wanted and that we had had a considered conversation about it.
Is it more of a challenge when it comes to an agnostic or an atheist?
Well, I run on the assumption that all people have the capacity for spirituality. And for some people that is tied into a religious practice or a religious belief system. But for others it's about beauty, it's about life, it's about what gives pleasure and what gives joy and what gives meaning. And so in that, I believe that all people can be spiritual people. Not all will identify themselves as spiritual, but more and more I'm finding people will identify as spiritual and less religious. But the same conversation, I think, is essential to have happen. And as chaplains, I think we all agree that we encounter people, we each have our own faith tradition we come from, but we come with openness to where the others are, because I believe that all people have that capacity and have the opportunity to have deep, deep meaning in their lives.
I believe that also. And Tanya, I'm going to finish with you. If there has been no planning at all when there is a medical emergency, how can chaplains really help those families?
In the midst of that emergency, it's easy to get caught up in the fear, kind of the feeling of out of control. And I think what a chaplain can offer is a place to stop, breathe. Let's sit down, look one another in the eye right now and really remember who, mom, dad, whoever it is, what would they want right now. It's so easy for any of us to get lost in all the multitude of choices that there are out there, but a chaplain can really come in and just help facilitate that conversation and help people really honor and get to the heart of who that person is and how we can go forward.
Okay, so to be clear, on the health directive, the most important question, as you heard Holly put it earlier, who do you
would you want to speak for you if you could not speak for yourself?
And do you believe that's the most important as well?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I would too.
All right, we are a collective. We all agree on unanimously. You all have your health directives?
Yes.
I've bust open champagne
I've
tonight.
got my appointment set to do it in a couple weeks, and
Excellent.
have had many, many conversations with family, so they know where I stand. But being part of this, I'm on the ball and ready to do it.
She's on the ball. Well, thank you all for being here. Up next, how you can participate in honoring choices with your family. But first, these Minnesotans talk about the value of having an end-of-life conversation with family and friends.
There's also a sense, and I'm seeing this from this conversation, how much you can help the people you love by doing this and make their lives easier in a time of tremendous difficulty, stress, and strain. And I think I see the sense of duty in that to the loved ones to help make this process work better.
You know, try to get this as part of just an annual renewal type deal that you do with, you know, with your car and with your life insurance and with your health stuff. There's just something that you should discuss on a regular basis, because without question, you know, life for all of us changes. It's going to change. It's going to be challenging, and there will be times when this is very important. And I think it's at those times that discussion really holds its weight.
The conversation we have today, it's therapeutic. It's intellectually and emotionally therapeutic. The conversation is a healing conversation. And to have more different varieties of experiences for people to engage in those conversations, these conversations, is healthy for individuals, it's healthy for families, and it's healthy for community.
We've heard from families, from the medical community, and the faith community about the importance of family conversations. But how do you fit into the Honoring Choices picture? Here to help us is Barbara Green, Community Engagement Director, and Katie Snow, Project Coordinator, both from the Twin Cities Medical Society. Well, thanks to both of you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Barbara, you won the coin toss, you get the first question. I wanted to ask you something we've heard some different perspectives on tonight, and that's about when to start this conversation. We've heard different age opinions, and I'm wondering from your perspective, when does the talk start?
You know, it really begins for families at any time. We always encourage individuals 18 years and older to begin this conversation, but for many families it may start much younger. For some families it's a part, you know, because death is a part of life, it's something that can be talked about, but we really encourage, again, people at least 18 years of age and older to begin this.
You know, and we are learning tonight, not just the website we've been mentioning, but there are a lot of resources out there. Katie, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about ones you've experienced and worked with in your profession.
Sure. Many of the resources can be found on our website, honoringchoices.org. There are hundreds of video clips and stories from people of different cultures, different faiths, and the video clips are really tremendously powerful. It's always powerful to hear other people's personal stories, and that's a resource because the stories give you ideas for what you might want as you plan for your future health care, and they inspire you, and that's a great resource, as well as there's a healthcare directive form if someone would like a form to help them complete the process. That's online.
Does it have sort of a checklist format? What's that form look like?
There are some required questions, and then there are a bunch of optional questions, such as if you want to go into more personal details about your thoughts and opinions and beliefs about your future healthcare goals and what is quality of life to you, because it's so personal, and each person's going to have completely different answers, so it allows that.
You know, Barbara, I did want to ask you about the multicultural community, because when I was looking at the website, like Katie mentioned, one of the things I found really surprising is how much I got out of testimonials from people who weren't of the same background as me, seeing how different cultures talk about this subject. I learned a lot about the discussion I could have in my own life. So I'm wondering, in your work, how do you work with multicultural communities to share the different stories?
That's such an important question, and what we really do is work with community leaders, because these topics are very sensitive, and we often work with faith leaders, a whole variety of representatives to work with us and join us as partners in this initiative. So, for example, with the listening sessions that are on our website, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
You know, they're fascinating listening sessions with people who have perhaps never spoken about end-of-life wishes with others, and we've discovered that people really got involved in talking about their beliefs and their values and really learned a lot each other from them.
How does it work in the big group dynamic? Because I can imagine there'd be two different sort of psychological mindsets if you're having a one-on-one conversation with a care physician, or if you're in a group like we saw in these listening sessions where people are really opening up. Have you found that the big groups are ever conduits to greater conversations?
Very much so. For some of the larger groups, we had people who participated and said, you know, I think I'm probably going to be more quiet. I don't have as much to say. I'm not an authority on this. I haven't experienced a death recently. But the stimulation of talking with other people about passionate things and life-changing things really stimulated them. So incredible stories came, and I think everyone found it extremely invigorating.
You know, Katie, is it possible, do you think, to be an advocate for this cause outside your own support structure, your family group? Because, I mean, we've been joking tonight about who's got their directive and having a laugh about that. But if you believed in this cause and wanted to talk to a stranger or a coworker to encourage them, I think it might come across as a little weird. You know, do you have your healthcare directive in line? How do you advocate for these important issues without, you know, sounding a little off the deep end?
Yeah, well, I agree with you. It is a new topic for many people and something they're afraid to talk about. But with everyone we've spoken with, they say that they are so thankful they've had the conversation. No one says that they regret it. So I definitely agree that it's worthwhile. And once you think of different organizations that you're involved in, such as your faith community or even a neighborhood association, any type of organization you're involved with, it doesn't have to be friends and family, but you could suggest this topic as a topic of discussion in a discussion group, or have a speaker come in. We'd be happy to find a speaker from Honoring Choices Minnesota for groups that are interested in hearing about it.
You know, I wanted to try to end, if we could, on maybe just a success story to show why this is so important, either maybe through your personal life, if you're willing to share, or through your work. When has this process worked well and you've seen it really impact lives positively?
You know, one story that really comes to mind happens to be with the Hmong community and with a close friend and colleague of mine. And often in the Hmong community, you know, in speaking about death, you're inviting it to happen. So it's a very sensitive subject. But colleagues of mine have found that in speaking about it and breaking the silence per se, a great relief and a great comfort happens with families. So it's been very life-changing for families and individuals that have really never had the conversation before.
Sounds like important work.
It is.
Barbara, Katie, thanks so much for your time, and keep up the great work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now here's another look at the documentary, Honoring Choices at the End of Life.
Fall of 2010, I was out with my daughters raking leaves, and I didn't have much energy at the time, and my lungs just turned into fire. Then later during that fall, I had all kinds of neurological problems, strange stuff with my feet and numbness in my legs. 65th birthday, February 17th, I'm driving here to a birthday party. People got coffee and cake for me. 10 minutes before I get here, the phone rings, cell phone, pick it up. The doctor says, well, we finally figured out what you got. One guy in the country who's an expert on this at Mayo in Scottsdale discovers that I have granular pulmonary lymphoma. There are only 500 to 600 people in the medical literature that have ever been reported having it. Prognosis is not good. That's all I know, so I go in and have a birthday party. Well, come to find out when I start reading the literature is that the average survival time after diagnosis, the median, is 14 months.
A good work of art can.
I think that first month was talking to close friends, but what changed it out of nowhere was a year ago on March 18th, I walked in a class and a student said, well, have you seen it on the internet yet? I said, what are you talking about? She said, the Monty Butte fan club. And she said, oh, maybe I wasn't supposed to say. Well, it turns out former students and colleagues started a fan club. And it sort of outed me in an odd way. And that kind of changed the nature of this whole process. I think without that, this would have been probably a much more private experience. A friend of mine said, I don't know how you're dealing with this. He said, I would have just gone home, climbed into the covers, and pulled them over my head. And that might have been more my reaction. But suddenly it kind of hit me between the eyes. You're a teacher. This is a teachable moment.
You know, we've been talking a lot about the website tonight, so we thought, of course, we better show it to you. The address is very easy. It's just Honoring Choices, that's 2 words together, no space, honoringchoices.org. Should we take a look?
We have to take a look. I love this
It's a pretty
website,
cool
by the way.
website.
It's very cool.
I've actually spent a lot of time with it preparing for this show, and the nice thing about it is it's intuitive. It's not complicated. You can get right into the information right away. And if you look right at the top headings here, you have a lot of the things we've been discussing tonight. The video stories, the testimonials, very powerful stuff. You click on these and you can sort by cultural background, by age, by religious faith, any way you want to do it. And so you can really zero in on the content that makes sense.
Right.
And you talked in your discussion a little bit, of course, about
documentaries.
Yep.
You know, and it's important that people get a chance to see this and revisit it over and over again. That's the beauty about this website. You can come back to it over and over again.
I think the thing we've heard again and again tonight is you need tools to start the conversation, and that's what this website is really intended to do, to just give you, the communication resources, the background to start the conversation.
Start the conversation and the forms to even fill out. I mean, it's all there. You want to know where it is, just come to the website and we'll lead you to it.
And I was leading you to my favorite part with that start the conversation. You're always embarrassed when I do this, but this is kind of neat. So let's say you're having trouble starting the conversation.
Yes.
Maybe you don't want to say the words, you don't want to bring it up. Geraldine has been generous with her time, as she always is, and recorded some special email messages. So if you go to this website here, right under Evite Your Family, type in names, who you want to send it to, and then you can pick your very own Geraldine Steele video. So maybe you want to tell us a little bit about this part of the process?
Well, it says here, Geraldine Steele says your family wants to have a conversation. That's exactly what it'll say to you. If you send this to your family, by the way, you guys, it's time for us to get together and talk about the big D word.
Yep.
And don't be afraid to do it.
and you can customize it. And of course, if you're someone who really likes information, we have this resources and links tab, and this is a powerful one because a lot of the things we've been talking about tonight are listed here. So, you know, if you were curious by any of the conversations we had, here's the next place to go. Take a look at all of these
All
right
the
here.
facts are here. And of course, you can join the online discussion. I think that's my favorite part of this. If you have some questions, you can ask them here at the website.
Yeah, it's a great resource, and we'll just mention it one more time so everyone can take a note at home. honoringchoices.org, no space. You write .org. And
You know I have to ask you the question, though.
What's that?
Do you have yours? Have you done it?
You know what? It's funny. We're out of time, and now we have to read some copy. But you know what? I will tell you the truth. I have been inspired tonight, and I am going to make some changes in the coming days.
Good enough.
Thanks, John.
Honoring Choices is a 2-year project with 6 documentaries, the first of which premieres in September of 2011 on TPT and TPT.org. Check your local listings for airtimes. And for more ways to talk to your families about these challenging issues, be sure to visit honoringchoices.org. Thanks so much for watching.
End of Life Planning, Family Stories is a co-production of the Twin Cities Medical Society, providing physician leadership for the health of our communities, and TPT's Minnesota channel. Funding has been provided by these foundations and companies.